You're it. I'm Amanda Malcolm, and you're listening to You're It, Girl, a podcast focused on you and what propels you, because that past, it does not define you. Your time is now, and you're it, girl. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to You're It, Girl. I'm your host, Amanda Malcolm. Thank you for your support, your episode ideas, your love, and your encouragement in keeping You're It, Girl going. Especially in my absence, I really do appreciate it. And hold tight for this one. I'm on sort of a series talking a lot about growth and development and things that I struggle with. So basically, you're all going to know all the things that I struggle with. But I think that all of us, or many of us, not all, many of us struggle with many of these types of things. And so I'm just going to start talking about them because it's usually helpful to me when I start talking about these things, because then it raises my awareness about what I'm actually thinking about and feeling. And then when I have awareness, then it's just, quite frankly, easier for me to address it and then heal from it. So that's why we're going to talk about it. And this, I'm going to share a very eye-opening story about people pleasing and my daughter. And although it is hilarious in some ways, it really opened my eyes to how deeply rooted this trait is in my psyche. So I was at an ACA meeting recently, an adult child of alcoholics meeting, and I try to go frequently now to these meetings, and every one of them is insightful. It pretty much fast-tracked my therapy. I knew there was a part of me that experienced some things that sometimes I couldn't figure out where these things were coming from. And I thought they were really abnormal. But being a part of this incredible group of people just reassures me that these characteristics that I have, that I often feel and don't express, are normal. And knowing where they come from and why really helps me to work on them. I'll give an example, but it's fascinating and important and especially insightful to go to these meetings if you have grown up in a household with any sort of addiction and dysfunction. So here is a good example. One good example is actually wondering what's actually normal. What's normal to feel, and being in situations that you look at and think, I should feel comfortable in this situation. It should be normal to want to do this, but it really gives me a lot of anxiety and I feel really uncomfortable, and I don't think it's normal that I feel this way. And there's actually a book that talks about this a little bit too, in The Body Keeps the Score. I'm a super huge fan of this book. My therapist recommended it to me years ago. I never read it when she recommended it to me, and then picked it up a couple times prior to the last 3 years, couldn't get through it. And then finally, after I released the podcast, I just was completely engrossed with the material of this book. I actually listened to it on Audible, and I have a copy that has tons of notes highlighted through it. So it's written by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. So if you haven't read it, highly recommend it. He discusses how trauma profoundly affects a person's comfort in social situations. We often struggle with feeling safe in situations that others would likely feel normal, even in familiar environments like family gatherings or simple social settings, meeting friends at a restaurant, things where others might feel completely at ease. And he explains that when we've gone through trauma as children, that this can lead to a sort of hypervigilance type of feeling and an emotional numbness, or a sense of isolation, often making it difficult for us to truly connect with others or to feel relaxed in situations that are actually meant to be enjoyable. And then we'll experience the opposite in a situation that actually is stressful. Could be an altercation with a colleague, or some sort of altercation with maybe a client or somebody who maybe comes into your store, and we'll feel perfectly comfortable in situations like this, but really uncomfortable in a normal situation that actually is safe. And this is because the body and the brain is on high alert in these circumstances that are actually peaceful and calm, because it's waiting to experience something that might actually happen, which is really quite odd. But before reading this and then going into meetings, I truly couldn't understand what the heck was wrong with me, why I felt so much anxiety by doing simple things like this. And let me explain a little bit more, because you would never notice this if you were to see me in that type of setting. You wouldn't know that I am nervous about even the event before it even happens. I'll look at the invite several times. I'll make sure the date is right on my calendar. I look at a map to see how I'm going to get there. I'm always concerned about the parking. Where am I going to park? What if I don't know where the building is? What if I don't know where I'm going? And then I get in there and then there's people there that I don't know. And so I force myself to interact in the situation. But if I don't know enough people or a lot of people, it's really hard for me to stay comfortable. And you'll often notice that I'm one that will bail from the party, or I'll show up very late once everybody is already engaged. That way I can find a group of people to interact with, so I'm not in the entire group where people aren't all seeing me arrive. It's very odd that you'd be going through all of this in your brain, but this is the reality. Oftentimes, most birthday parties that I'm invited to, I sometimes don't show up, or I'm, like I said, the one that leaves really early, bails, or shows up super late. And I always thought this was incredibly weird, and that there's no way that anybody else in the world could possibly be feeling the same way about it. But I also then realized by going to these meetings that there are actually a lot of people like me. And I finally understood why, which makes it easier for me to work on it moving forward. So I have been thinking a lot about this. I tend to do a lot of overthinking these days. And at these particular meetings, they always start out a certain way. And then we go around the room and we share our thoughts and experiences. And usually it relates to whatever it is that we were reading about that day, whatever the topic is that day. And so recently, the topic at the meeting was forgiveness. It's forgiveness of our parents, but awareness of the characteristics we developed because of the circumstances that we experienced with them when we were living with them. And forgiveness is really the topic of the meeting, and it's a place that I do realize is really difficult to get to. When I finally forgave my mom and my dad for how our family dynamic ended up, it felt like such a sense of peace. And it's been a very long time now. But I know if anybody is struggling to let go of this, there's just something about it that once you release it and you finally can actually forgive, you just have a sense of calm that comes over your entire body. And then you have the ability to actually be able to understand and have empathy for maybe some of the things that happened or some of the things they said and why they did it. You have empathy for maybe what their situation was and what they were going through. Forgiveness it's a beautiful thing. And forgiveness is really true peace. I think it's a tough practice to get there, but once you do, it's just so calming. But this wasn't really the part of the meeting that stuck with me. I just think it's important to remember that and always keep that in mind if it's something that you're struggling with. But the part of the particular meeting that struck me is how deeply rooted many of these characteristics are that we have developed because of our childhood, and how they've shaped us into the people that we are, and how, I don't want to say how we run our lives, but how those things actually run our lives. And one of these characteristics is people pleasing. And I know everyone is talking about this right now, just like everyone is talking about narcissists right now. I'm going to get on a little soapbox right now because not everybody is a freaking narcissist. Just some people have narcissistic behaviors and not everybody struggles with people pleasing. Just sometimes they exhibit people pleasing behaviors. And I want to be clear about this because true people pleasing is actually toxic. People pleasing is it's not going above and beyond to do something that's required for your job. It's not just being kind to people or doing something nice for your neighbor or knowing when to speak up or not speak up in a situation where you might cause additional drama or bring negativity into a space or make somebody angry or upset. These things are not people pleasing. People pleasing, again, is actually toxic. It's considered toxic because it leads you to sacrificing your own needs and values and well-being in order to get approval or to avoid conflict. This is very specific. For many of us that have experienced trauma, people-pleasing basically just became a survival mechanism for us. And we became so used to doing it that we do it all the time. But in the long run, it holds us back from living authentically. And here's why. Because it's toxic. Because it leads to a loss of self-identity. When you're constantly putting others first, this causes you to lose touch with your own desires, your own goals, and your own true self because you're putting theirs ahead of yours. And that's why I say this is just not as simple as going above and beyond for work or doing something for a friend. This is much more than that. It is sacrificing everything that is important to you and making that other person, their needs, their desires, their values more important. And that is your number one focus. And you suppress everything that's actually important to you. And as survivors of any sort of trauma, we also may feel that we need to be everything for everyone in order to feel worthy, especially if there were a lot of people that may be in your situation that you kind of had to be there for. But this also strips away your own individuality. And then it makes it harder for you to pursue your own personal passions and dreams because we're focused on somebody else's. I think this probably might resonate with a lot of us right now. And also, it leads to what we talked about in the previous episode, emotional exhaustion and burnout. Ding, ding, ding. You see how all these things relate together? Because when you start studying it and you try to overcome it and heal from it, you realize that all these things are really attached to each other. And that's why getting through each of these things really seems so rough once you address them because the mountain just seems so high. But this all relates. So again, if you didn't listen to the previous episode, go listen to that because we talk about burnout and negative self-talk. But people-pleasing depletes energy. And that relates to burnout. Because when we overextend ourselves to make other people happy, we neglect our own mental, emotional, and physical health. And this behavior then leads to, unfortunately, resentment of those people sometimes, burnout like we talked about, frustration. And this is all because our needs aren't being met because we're giving it up for somebody else completely. Lots of times unintentionally, we don't even realize we're doing it. And then this also leads us to tolerate disrespect and unhealthy relationships because as people pleasers, we are often uncomfortable with confrontation. And this leads us to tolerate things that are unhealthy or sometimes abusive. Trauma survivors in particular often struggle with boundaries. And so this trait also leads us vulnerable to manipulation and further harm because we want to please people all the time. And then we sacrifice our own boundaries without sometimes even realizing that we're doing it. And so I go to these meetings and I talk about these things because I'm so interested in the psychology of overcoming these things. And a lot of that is because as a parent, I have 3 goals. 1, making sure that my daughter feels love and knows what love feels like and knows how to give love and also support in there as well. And then 2, setting her up to be able to take care of herself, teaching her to be able to be responsible and resilient and giving her the confidence and the tools that she needs to do that. And then 3, not passing on these crazy characteristics to her. And so this is the part of the story that's funny. It turns out my 10-year-old, Kennedy, is actually the one that truly opened my eyes to my struggle with people pleasing. And here's the story. So she had an incident with a little friend, and they'd been friends for quite a little bit, and something happened at my house when they were playing. It's not something that I'm not going to share the whole story because it is something that it's confidential and inappropriate. But I will say that it was an inappropriate situation that made Kennedy very uncomfortable. And she came to me after it happened. It took a lot to be able to get it out of her. And finally, I got the story. She felt so uncomfortable. She didn't want to hang out with this friend for a while. And it was probably a few months. And then I noticed that one day her dad had told me that he had dropped her off at this friend's house. And I said, oh, that's so odd. I thought she didn't want to play there. And so I picked her up from the friend's house and I said, oh, honey, I thought you didn't want to play at the house anymore. And she said, oh yeah, because of that thing? And I said, yeah, because of the thing. And she goes, oh yeah, I don't know. I haven't really been thinking about the thing. And I said, oh, okay. Well, if you've talked about it and you feel good about it and it doesn't bother you anymore, then it's fine. Good. And I think it's resolved. Well, a few weeks later, the anxiety and this discomfort starts coming up again. Her friend is calling her and texting, wanting to hang out. She doesn't want to. Now this turns into a 4 or 5 month, maybe a little bit longer process where she's making up excuses. She doesn't know what to say. Sometimes she doesn't respond. Then the girl is asking me, the parents are asking me, and now I'm basically covering for my daughter, making up excuses. A lot of times we were on trips or she had dance, so it was a little bit easy to be able to put off these play dates. But obviously, I think the parents started to get wind of it a little bit. And I think they figured out that their daughter wasn't invited to Kennedy's birthday party. So it really turned into a thing. And she felt so uncomfortable about it. She finally said, Mama, I don't know what to do. She just won't stop contacting me. And around this same time, the mom had actually texted me and said, hey, I know this is uncomfortable. I know there's things that have happened between the girls. Girls at this age, sometimes things just happen. I understand if Kennedy doesn't want to hang out. My daughter's had things happen with other girls, and I don't want to push anything, but she got her this present that she wants to send her in the mail. I'm going to send it to you because she just won't drop it. So please understand, you don't have to give it to her. And I agreed that I would give it to her. And she said, I don't know what happened. I said, I do know what happened. I said, I should have brought it up before, but I didn't. And then the mom just didn't press, didn't ask me. So I got the feeling that maybe the mom knew, or maybe there had been another incident with another friend. So I dropped it. And then the item came in the mail for Kennedy. And then she felt the little girl had written her a note, and she felt a little bit bad about it. And she said, I really love the gift. It's so kind of her, but I still just don't want to be her friend because of this thing. And I just want her to leave me alone. And so I said, well, I think the best way to do that is to write her a letter. I said, because we're getting lots of text messages, lots of voicemails. She's trying to contact you in multiple ways. And sometimes it's really hard for people, if they do not have closure, including small children, as to why this relationship has ended. It's very difficult for people to, even kids, people, all of us, to not have closure and a reason why. And sometimes we just don't get it. But as a child, it's even more difficult. So I explained to her that the best way to make her stop contacting you is to tell her why. And I said, a letter is a good thing to do, because if you write the letter, she would have to actually write you back. If you were to do it in text message or send an email or to get on a phone or something, there's back and forth. But a letter, you can shut it down. And I said, and then if she contacts you, you can ask her if she received the letter. And then you can block and shut her down, but it would probably be helpful. And then also I said it'd be therapeutic because then she could explain what happened, get her feelings out. So she works on this letter. Very well done. I was so proud of her. It was hard for her to do. She had anxiety writing it. You could tell she would pause in between, but she wrote it all out, even the inappropriate stuff. And even in the letter, she said, this is not something that you can repeat to anyone else. You can talk about it with your mom, but that's it. And then she signed it her name and then said that she knows that she understands and this is why she doesn't want to be her friend anymore. And so that was the end of the letter. So we're packaging up the letter. And I say to her, I said, oh, you know what, honey, you know what we should do? We should, with the letter, I said, let's put a little gift in there. You know, we can do a little self-care pack. We can put something in there, maybe like a teddy bear, maybe put like a little face mask, and we could just package it all up and then send it in the mail. And then when she gets it, you know, she'll get the letter. It'll be a little bit uncomfortable, but then, you know, this thing will make her feel good. She literally looks at me and she goes, what? No, we can't send her a present. And I was like, well, why? She sent you a present, and so we'll send the letter and then send the present with it. She goes, Mom, no, I can't send her a present. You can't send people presents to make them feel good when they've done things that don't make you feel good. And anyway, if I send her a present, then she's going to think that I want to be her friend, and I don't. And I stopped and I looked at her and I'm like, wow, you know what? You're right. We don't send people presents when they do things that are not nice. You do not send people presents for things like that. We don't make people feel good when they've done things. And also, how confusing. She's 1,000% correct. How confusing to send a gift to someone you're sending a letter to stop communication. And this simple little story is, I am sharing it to show just how deeply rooted this thing is that I was going to let my daughter follow through on this whole process. It's so deeply ingrained. And so the point is, first, I just want to celebrate this win though. I want to celebrate the win. And I'm definitely not one that takes praise oftentimes well, but I think we all know why that is, but we should celebrate our wins. And this is a parenting win. It is a parenting win. Hallelujah to me, because I successfully know that I did not pass on this trait to my daughter. This is not a behavior that she is going to struggle with. She did not grow up in an environment where she's been taught this. She doesn't feel like this. And she clearly knows how to put herself first. She clearly knows this is inappropriate. And so this is a win. I literally have cried about this particular win because I am so proud in that moment that she, one, stood up for herself, and then two, recognized, unfortunately, she had to call me out that this was inappropriate. And now I've had a lot of therapy surrounding this. I've been working with my life coach on this, but there's nothing more in your face than hearing your 10-year-old tell you that. So now, every time this has come up since, and this is really only recently, I stop in my tracks and think twice about what I'm doing. So what you can do is this, if you struggle with this same thing. Here are 3 effective strategies that I'm working on as I talk about this in this episode. 1 is practice setting boundaries. Start saying no to minor requests that might feel draining or unnecessary. Because setting the boundaries like this at the beginning is crucial for breaking the people-pleasing habit. And I'll give just a small example. I was supposed to go meet someone for lunch, and they asked me, hey, what's most convenient to you? And my normal response would be, oh, no worries, we can just go where you are. I'll come all the way over there and drive all the way across town 30 minutes to go meet with you so it's convenient for you. And I stopped and I read that message and I thought, they're asking me what's convenient for me. And so I said, thank you. You're so kind. I so appreciate you asking. What's actually most convenient is if we meet in my neighborhood. And it was so small, but it felt so empowering. I thought to myself, why was I even going to suggest that I go and drive all the way over there? This person was asking me, and I was about to sacrifice over something so small. And so practice in these small ways, and you'll be able to protect your personal space and energy, and it will get a little bit easier. So I'm practicing this. I will let you know how it goes in future episodes. And then identify and challenge these limiting beliefs that we have. Many of us as people pleasers, the big thing is that we're driven by a fear of rejection or the belief that our worth depends on making others happy. This is a big thing for me. And same thing with just a simple lunch text. I wanted to make it easier for them. I wanted to make them happy. And so I was going to just go do this thing just in case they had maybe said it and didn't really mean it. And then I'd be afraid that maybe they wouldn't feel like I was valuing their time or their energy. This is where you go to start to spiral in your head when really it is just as simple as saying, no, thank you for asking. You can come meet me on my side of town and it's going to be much more convenient and I'm so excited to see you. It's simply just that. And then the third thing, we've talked about this in the previous episode as well, prioritizing self-care and self-compassion. Putting yourself first is not selfish, even though we think that it is. And this is something that maybe we were told as kids too. I remember my mom told me this all the time. That was her number one go-to would be how selfish I was. How selfish I was for not thinking about one of my siblings. How selfish I was for doing something. How selfish I was for not thinking about something else first. Over and over again, that played in my head. So this is a challenge for people pleasers because we think if we don't put other people first and we put ourselves first, that then that negative self-talk in our head is saying, oh yes, we are indeed selfish because we didn't ask them what they wanted. We are indeed selfish because we didn't do this thing for them. But that is entirely not true. And we can practice this by doing the things that I said, and then also just scheduling time for yourself to pursue your own passions, like I just did today by scheduling this time to record the podcast freaking finally and engaging in the activities that actually bring you joy, because these things nurture your self-compassion and these things ultimately reinforce your sense of self-worth and then help you really break this cycle of people pleasing. And so I challenge you to work on that thing. I am working on it. I will let you know how it goes. If you have any questions or want to share your wins with me, please do. And thank you for listening. That's Your It Girl.